For question 2a, the instruction is to solve. So stay focused. Solve means you will find the value of x, which some of you didn't. Some of you, I don't know what you are doing. I don't think you also know what you're doing. Okay, so for part 1, a lot of you got it wrong. Okay, so I show the correct one, then I show what most people did. So to me, I see a quadratic because there's an x squared. So if there is a quadratic, I will bring it over so I get equal to 0. So quadratic equation, you need the equal to 0, then you will try to factorize. Again, you need to go back to the 4 steps of factorization. So in this case, it's just taking out common factor. So you will get the first bracket equal to 0, second bracket equal to 0. So that's just a quadratic equation. So those who do wrongly, okay, so the wrong one, okay, what do you do? So a lot of you, first of all, you look at the 5 and 20. You realize that, oh, I can simplify, and that's correct. So you're going to divide by 5 on both sides. Then after that, you realize, hey, I got x that I can cancel. So most people will do this. And then they will tell me that this is the answer. So if you do this, your mistake is you divide by x. So we cannot divide by algebra. So during solving, you cannot divide by algebra, but you can divide by number. You can divide number on both sides, but you cannot divide algebra on both sides. So what is the effect? You only got one answer when the real one got two answers. Whoever cancel x, or if you cancel a function in x, you will end up with a missing answer. So that is a conceptual or technical issue. So take note of why you got missing answer. Of course, if you got missing answer, you're not going to get your full marks. Second question is pretty easy, but some of you got mind blocked by the fraction. So your job is to find x. So some of you realize that, okay, I know I can bring the number over. Yes, you can bring the number over. Then from here, right, some people will get confused. And what do I do? So if you see a fraction in this way, you can actually go for cross multiplication. And from here, you can take a square root. And doing a square root will get you two answers, a positive answer or a negative answer. So some of you got everything wrong for this 2a. So you need to make sure you learn. So some of you are not even solving. So some of you really like quite lost. You just do whatever you see and whatever that comes to your mind. You got no technique in your head. So question part 1, you realize it's quadratic because there's an x squared. Okay, part 2 is also quadratic, but part 2 is an easier quadratic. Part 3 is also a quadratic. Okay, so there are two ways of doing the quadratic. So I'm going to show you the generic way first. Generic way is a bit longer, but it's fine. So if you look at part 3, so some people will go and expand, it's fine. You can go and expand. So if you have expanded out, you will get something like this. And bear in mind, it's still a quadratic. So you should shift everything over. Shift the x over. Shift the number over. So you got equal to 0. So eventually it goes back to the same method. You got to factorize, and then first bracket equal to 0, second bracket equal to 0. Okay, so you will get something like this. So a lot of people will actually forget. So this is the generic method. Okay, another method. Okay, another method will be this. Some of you might realize that how come there is a bracket that looks identical? So there is a bracket that looks identical. So some people end up canceling the bracket. So some people will tell me this is what they do. So if you try doing this, you will get a 6. So this is wrong. You cancel a function in X. It's the same mistake as second part. It's the same mistake as the first part. You cannot cancel X. You cannot cancel things with X. So if you have cancelled a bracket with X, you will lose out one answer. Okay, so this is the wrong one. So quite common, some people who detect that the brackets are the same will end up cancelling. So you're not supposed to do that. So for those people, if you detect that the bracket are the same, what should you do to the bracket? Instead of cancelling, you should bring the bracket over and use the bracket as a common factor. So instead of cancelling, you should see it as a common factor. So to me, that is a common factor. I'm left with this and this. So when the common factor is being taken out, I'm left with x minus 5 minus 1. So eventually, I still got the same two brackets. So you realize that it's the same bracket. So obviously, I should get the same answer. So these are the two methods. Okay, so whichever method, it doesn't, it will still get the full marks as long as you don't have careless mistake. Unless you go and cancel the bracket x plus 2. Okay, the last part is the one where you see fraction plus fraction again. So fraction plus fraction is the same logic. You got to make same denominator. So you should check out what's missing first. Between these two, you need a x minus 1. So you multiply by x minus 1. The second fraction is missing on a 4. So you multiply by a 4. While you make same denominator, don't touch a half. So it's the same technique, same denominator. I get a single fraction. So my approach is I'm going to do a cross multiplication. So before you do your cross multiplication, maybe you would like to, expand carefully first. So I'm just going to take my answer. So I expand so that it's easier for me to cross multiply. So usually my habit is I will simplify as much as I can before I cross multiply. And you realize so far I have been keeping my equal sign in a line. So there should be a flow. Line 1 flow to line 2, line 2 flow to line 3. So after these 4 lines, I'm ready for cross multiplication. And when you cross multiply, you should realize that you are getting another quadratic equation. You should realize that you are getting another quadratic equation. So you should focus on bringing the 4x over, the minus 12 over. You need the equal to 0 for your quadratic equation to work. So eventually you will need to factorize, but if you observe, if all the numbers can be divided by 2, it will be easier if you divide by 2, then you try to factorize. I think I made a careless mistake. Hang on. This is a careless. Copy wrongly, so this should be a 1. Okay. So there's a careless here, careless here, careless here. So my cross multiplication also got careless. So when I cross multiply, so you divide by 2. So you will get x minus 3, x minus 3. First bracket equal to 0, second bracket equal to 0. But because both brackets are the same, you end up getting only one answer. So when there should be a flow in your working, line 1 flow to line 2. How do you flow? So like for example, in this situation, this line, from this flow to this, I make same denominator. Here, I got it as a single fraction. Here, I expand, I simplify, and then eventually I get to cross multiply. So every step that you flow, there should be something that you are doing at each step. So you got to take each step with some technique. You must be aware that what are you doing at each of the steps. So here, eventually I'm solving. So you got to find the value of x. B part, second part, a lot of you got issue after the factorization. So a lot of you got issue. So those of you, if you got issue with the second part, that generally is because of the concept of comparing. So for the second part, your job is to be able to compare. So if you try comparing this with this, so okay, let's omit the 0 first. Okay, you can put them side by side to compare. If you compare, right, 6 and 6 are identical. The square is also identical. So if you compare the x square, you realize that x is equivalent to t minus 1. So if you compare this, you also get the same conclusion. And if you compare minus 12 and minus 12, obviously there's nothing to compare. They are the same. So if you stack them up to compare, you will realize that x is actually equivalent to x minus 1. So this is the thinking process. You do not need to show the thinking process. So that is your thinking that you can scribble. So if you get the thinking already, we are going to make use of the factorize from the first part. So your thinking shows that x is t minus 1. That means this will be t minus 1. So 2, instead of 2x plus 3, you got 2t minus 1 plus 3. instead of 3x minus 4, you got 3t minus 1 minus 4. So simplify each of the bracket. So you do your expansion, you simplify each of the square bracket. You will get a 2t plus 1. You will get a 3t minus 7. So look at it, you're supposed to solve. Solve what? Solve for t. So first bracket equal to 0. Second bracket equal to 0. So this is the hence method. The otherwise method is just to fully expand out. So if you checked out my worked out solution, I show the otherwise method. The otherwise method is just to simply expand out. You will still get the same answer. That will have more chance of careless. If you do your expansion incorrectly, there are careless in your expansion. So that is for the otherwise. You can check my worked out solution for the otherwise method. So when you read a question, you read and you make sure you know what they are telling you. When they tell you to solve, that means you are finding a certain value. When they tell you to factorize, you just need to execute any of the 4 methods and you will have brackets. So that is the idea of factorize. So you cannot be lost as to like, so you don't know when you're going to solve, when you're going to factorize. And you should be, there should be a flow in your working. You've got to flow from line to line. So every line, how you flow, there must be a technique that guide you. Okay, so that is for question 2.